So far I've done the talking, and now it's time for us to go to work together. I'm going to need your help. We're going to go through a lot of scripture, and so one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is read. The way that's going to work is I'm not going to call on anybody, so I'll just say, would somebody please read Genesis 12, 1 through 3? If more than one of you start at the same time, then we'll have stereo until somebody desists, and if nobody desists, then we'll just have stereo, so no problem. Okay, so what we're doing now, we're going to lay a foundation, so a step-by-step foundation for the story that we're going to go through. What I would say is that if we don't understand what we're going to cover now, we're never going to understand the Israel story, because this is really the undergirding of it. So we're laying a foundation. We're going to start at the beginning of the Israel story, which is the call of Abram, later to be renamed Abraham. And by the way, that's very significant, because Abram means exalted father, Abraham, father of many nations. And the word for nations is goyim, or Gentiles. So this is obviously very much a part of your story. Okay, would somebody start us by reading Genesis 12 and 1 through 3, please?
Now the Lord had said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family and your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse him who curses you. And in you all of the families of the earth shall be blessed."
Okay, so let me ask you what may perhaps be the easiest question I'm going to ask you the whole time. Who is it that initiated this encounter? God. Well, that's very important, by the way, and it's very significant in the story. And actually, there's nothing in Scripture that indicates before this time that Abram knew God, that he was a godly person, that he walked with God. In fact, we know he grew up in an idolatrous family. It says in Joshua that Terah, his father, served other gods, little g. So what was it that God called Abram to leave?
His country.
I'm sorry?
His country.
His country, okay, because God was going to take him to a land that he was going to show him. Later we'll find out, the plot is going to thicken. He's actually giving it to him. But at this point, he just said, you want him to leave his country because he's going to take him to a land he'll show him. Okay, what else did he leave?
His house.
Okay, his family and his father's house. Why? Because God was really calling him to leave his lineage. From this man, God was intending to now create a new people group, and that's a people group that we're going to be talking about. Okay, if you jump way ahead in the story, this is in Romans 11, there's a verse that says that the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. How many of you have either read that or are familiar with that verse? Okay. Did you ever hear anybody teach on it? The gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable.
A little bit.
A little bit. It really stuck with you and had a major impact in your life, right? Okay. Usually, not in every context, but usually if somebody does speak about that, the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. They'll say, well, whatever gift, that God gave you, maybe gave you a gift of hospitality, or, if you believe in spiritual gifts for today, he gave you the gift of prophecy. Whatever it is that God gave you, whether or not you use it, you still have it. You don't lose it because it's irrevocable. Same with calling. You're called to be an evangelist. You're called to be a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker. Whatever you're called to be, whether you fulfill that calling or you don't fulfill it, you still have it because the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. I'm not saying that's not applicable, but that is really in the context of Romans 11. It's not speaking in general terms. That's what I would call allegorical teaching, which is taking something that's literal and then applying it to something else. Literally, it is speaking of the gifts and the calling of Israel. You'll see that as we go forward. So understanding that, just trust me at this point, we'll read it together later. Understanding that, what gifts do you see here? When God is calling Abram, what gifts are there?
A great name.
Okay, a great name. You could call that fame, for instance, okay?
He will be blessed.
Okay, blessing, absolutely. What else?
Great nation.
Great nation. And that's true. I would, in essence, call that a calling. You're called to be a great nation, but you could say it's a gift as well. He's going to bless you, but he's also going to make you what?
Be a blessed.
He's going to make you to be a blessing. And actually, I don't know about the rest of you. It's wonderful to be blessed, but it's also really awesome if God can allow you or enable you to bless others. Okay? Anything else?
Bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you.
Okay, I call that protection. God's got your back. And, I'm going to, and by the way, those words were never rescinded. So that's still working today. I'm going to bless those who bless you, and I'm going to curse those who curse you. There's another physical gift here. It's implied. It's not stated directly. Do you see it?
Children,
What's that?
families.
Well, family for sure. I mean, that is true, which was a big deal at that point. You know why?
Like,
Because he didn't have any kids. Yeah, his wife was barren. Okay, so that was a big deal. Okay, but there's another physical gift there. Do you see what it is?
Land.
The land. Okay, I mean, it's not stated here. He said, I'm going to take you to land. I'll show you. Later in the story, as I told you, the plot thickens. We'll see that it was also given. Okay, the land. How about a calling? God has created this unique people group. It's a people group that did not exist before this calling. What do you think the calling is upon Abram and his descendants?
He calls them to be a great nation.
Well, to be a great nation, of course, we'd have to define exactly what great means and in what context. Okay, and more than that.
To be a father.
What's that?
To be a father.
To be a father. He was called to be a father for sure, okay, of many nations. What else? The calling on this people group, not just on Abram, but on the people group. He's created this special people group to be the people of God. Now, granted, later everybody's invited into that relationship, but at this point, he's created the Jewish people to be the people of God. Okay, let me ask you this question. Was Abram a Jew when God called him?
No.
No, he wasn't a Jew. I mean, there was no such thing at that point, and actually the name Jew comes from the name Judah, who was Abram's great-grandson. So, I mean, obviously, he didn't have any children at this point, so no, he was not a Jew. Was he an Israelite?
No.
Well, that wasn't an Israelite, because that's named after his grandson, who was originally named Jacob, and then his name was changed to Israel, and also it applies to people living in the land, which they weren't at that point. No, he was not an Israelite. Do you think that he desired to live in Canaan? Is there any indication? I mean, what's your thought? Do you think Abram sat around thinking, man, I'd really like to live in Canaan someday and inherit Canaan? Awesome. Do we have any idea? I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. Okay, well, we don't really know. I think there's a little indication. If you read in Hebrews 11, which is the chapter in the New Testament which speaks of the great men and women of faith, it says in Hebrews 11:8, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place which he would afterward receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. Okay, so when God called him, he didn't even know where he was going. So I sincerely doubt that he was sitting around thinking, man, I'd really like to inherit Canaan someday. Why is that relevant? Well, I'd say one reason is that if you're influenced by international media today, you would think the Jews are just a bunch of land grabbers who went over to the Middle East and stole somebody else's land. But I just want to say from the beginning, this wasn't our idea, okay? Don't blame us. Okay, anyway. All right. Let's go on. Do you think that Abram desired to be a great nation? Do you think you sat around with this secret ambition to be a great nation? I don't think so either. You're not talking to me. You're just shaking your heads. But okay. I agree. I don't think that's likely, because what we know is that Abram and his wife Sarai, that's what she was called, they were childless. And as we go on in the story, you'll see Abram had a conversation with God. He was just concerned about having one heir. He wasn't really thinking, about being a great nation. Okay, how many of you, I know you're a lot younger than me, so I'm not sure what they're teaching these days. How many of you had diagramming of sentences in school? Don't look at me funny. One person had. What? The rest of you, they don't teach. All right, diagram. Well, let me tell you, because you're looking at me weird. What is diagramming? I still remember my teacher, Miss Utz, 8th grade. She was a terror, but she was great at diagramming of sentences. Any of you ever go to a museum and see a blackboard? No. They actually had blackboards back then, okay? And chalk. And if you were the teacher's pet, you used to go out in the playground and you could beat the erasers. Okay. But anyway, so Miss Utz, she used to draw this line. This is how you do diagramming sentences. You learn different parts of speech. So you had a subject and a verb and an adjective and an adverb and et cetera, conjunction. Anyway, I like it because I have a linear mind. My wife has the opposite. I'm not sure exactly what that is. Whatever it is, we intersect occasionally and understand each other. Okay, but you might have to answer this if you're the only one that had, diagramming of senses. There is a subject and a verb that's repeated over and over in the verses we read. Can you see what it is?
I will.
I will. Okay. Who's speaking? God is speaking. So God, again, he's calling Abram to leave, to go to a land, God speaking, that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. How many of you want to know what God's will is? Anybody in here? Okay, so my suggestion is when we read scripture and God says, I will, I will, I will, and I will, we should pay attention because he's expressing what?
His will.
His will.
His will.
Okay. All right. So Abram is 75 years old when he enters into Canaan. God speaks to him again. We're not sure exactly how old he is now, somewhere between 75 and 85 years old. And this time he speaks to him in a vision. And he starts by speaking, this is God, starts by speaking and saying to Abram, don't be afraid, I'm your shield and your exceedingly great reward. Now, I'm going to paraphrase, but Abram basically responds, well, that's great. I mean, that's kind of his attitude. Well, that's nice. Okay, you're my shield, my exceedingly great. But I don't have any kids, and one born in my house, is my heir, Eliezer of Damascus. In other words, what are you going to do for me? What are you going to give to me? Well, God's response, and we're still in the vision, God takes him outside. It's obviously nighttime. And the Lord points up at the stars of the heaven. He says to Abram, no, this guy's not going to be your heir, but one born from your body is going to be your heir. Look up at those stars. If you can count them, that's how many your descendants are going to be. And then the next verse, which I'm sure you're all familiar with and are all going to quote at this point. The next verse, do you know what it says after that? Again, God shows them, the heavens and the stars, and as many as those stars are, if you can count them, that's how many your descendants are going to be. Do you know what the next verse is? Very, very relevant in the Israel story and also relevant in all of our lives. Anybody know? It says, Abram believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. That, remember, he's the father of our faith. That is the basis of all of our relationship with God. We believe God. Remember, Abram didn't always do what was right. I don't know if you think it was a good idea. He's heading into Egypt. His wife's a good-looking woman. She happens to be his half-sister, by the way. She's a good-looking woman. So he turns to her and said, look, we're going to get into Egypt, and they're going to see you're a good-looking woman, and they're going to kill me. So I want you to say you're my sister. Well, that doesn't sound so bad. It's a half lie because she was a half sister. Well, they get into Egypt. What happens? Okay, Pharaoh's servants look at her. Hey, that's a good-looking woman. And so they take her and put her in Pharaoh's harem. Meanwhile, because, she's in Pharaoh. Now, fortunately, God protected her. Nothing happened there. But it could have. Abraham, meanwhile, Pharaoh's giving him all kinds of good gifts, and he's getting animals and servants and all this stuff because of his wife's. That's not the most righteous thing. And he did it twice. He did it once with Abimelech also. But anyway, point being, Abram didn't do everything right. But the scripture says he believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. There's a word for that in the New Testament. You know what it is? Grace. And that's what's impacted all of our lives. And so what I'd say to you, just think about this for a second. A lot of people look at the Old Testament and think, Old Testament, that's about law, On top of that, it's old, but it's about law. New Testament, about grace. There's a lot of grace in the Old Testament. Okay.